Item 25, thank you all very much. Good work.
Thank you.
Excellent work. Item 25 has been continued to our first meeting in January. We are on item 26. This is a fiscal year 2024 State Homeland Security Program grant proposal relating to automated license plate readers. Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor.
We will receive, Chief, would you like to make any comments on this, or would you like to answer questions? How would you like to do this? Either way is fine.
I have just a brief presentation to run through real quick. And
Ms. Brothers, welcome. Nice to see you. Thank you. Chief, you're on.
Okay, and I also have Mr. Solomon Valdez from the Flock Safety, and as well as Stephanie Duck, I believe, from the City Attorney's Office for any questions. Again, we are presenting to council, requesting the approval of the installation of automated license plate readers within the City of Santa Cruz, purchased through the 2024, fiscal year 2024 State Homeland Security Grant in the amount of $84,000. And in turn, approving the proposal letter that would be directed towards the Santa Cruz County Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience for the acceptance of that money. Next slide. I know that there was a lot of questions, a lot of issues around the efficacy of this equipment. So I wanted to provide, I know I provided a couple of these examples already in the first presentation a couple weeks ago, but I'll briefly go through some of the information that we researched. With the single camera that we currently have located down in the Beach Flats area, we have had in the approximate 27 days, we've had an average of one hit on either a stolen vehicle, stolen or lost license plates. We've had a total of 27 hits in basically 27 days just for the month of November. The single camera that we do have has been extremely valuable in the investigation of a shooting that occurred in the Beach Flats that occurred on November 19th, 2023. We also have utilized the camera on a commercial burglary that occurred on the wharf in the City of Santa Cruz, based on a vehicle description. That case is still actively being investigated. The vehicle and suspects have been involved in multiple burglaries across the county. As I mentioned before in the previous meeting, I talked about the robbery with a firearm in the downtown area and the collaboration with Roseville Police Department, utilizing their cameras and apprehending 4 suspects involved in that incident. I also talked about the homicide, which also included the 5-year-old girl in the city of Fremont, where our camera was able to alert our officers of the suspect vehicle in our city. Briefly, some very recent success stories. You're probably very aware, but Capitola Police Department, they do not have license plate readers, but they utilized the City of Watsonville's license plate readers just about 3 weeks ago, which was pivotal in their apprehension of the suspect involved in the fatal hit-and-run collision that occurred in their city middle of November. And go into a lot of the details of how that happened, but it was the license plate readers in the City of Watsonville that assisted them in apprehending that suspect. Just recently, there was an occupied residential burglary in the unincorporated area of Aptos, and the Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office utilized the cameras and the system from the City of Watsonville to apprehend the suspects involved in that crime in Aptos. Again, Bakersfield PD, they've utilized and apprehended 6 suspects involved in homicides. Morgan Hill PD, they just recently, in 2 years, they've had a reduction in 36% in burglaries, 14% of larcenies, and over 65% of catalytic converter thefts. South San Francisco, they've seen a reduction, 80% of auto burglaries and 50% of motor vehicle theft. and Benicia. I can continue to go on and on. Agencies are seeing a lot of success. However, a lot of this data is very short term, and to actually do a more thorough actual statistical analysis, you'd want to have a larger group of time and number of license plate hits and all of that to do it more thoroughly. So based off of the last meeting and conversations with community members, with the police independent auditor, with council, I wanted to go through, next slide, sorry, go through some changes that we did and modified our policy from the last meeting. The one suggestion came from a community member to more accurately reflect the definition of the automated license plate reader. So in turn, we added to the definition that it captures images of every vehicle that passes through the camera's view. That was a more accurate depiction of actually what it does. And that was, again, a suggestion from the community. You will see in 415.2, and again, this was all provided to all of you as well. We added the proper government code that more clearly defines the law as far as disseminating the information to any out-of-state or federal agencies, including out-of-state and federal law enforcement agencies for any information that we have through the ALPR system. 415.3, we deleted, there was a question and concern around the words Homeland Security. We've deleted that, and we've tried to more clearly define electronic surveillance by adding in parentheses, plotting the movement of wanted subjects or suspects. You go to 415.3.1. We've added several points of clarification there around. There was a lot of questions about the guidelines and procedures that had not been established as of 2 weeks ago. They have been established. They are later in the presentation, and they will be on our transparency portal. But we've added several points of clarification that I believe addresses a number of concerns and questions that came up at the last meeting. We'll go to 415.4. Again, there was D. There was questions or concerns around if practicable. So we added that the officer shall make every reasonable effort to verify. One quick point there, and I know the concern is they want the information verified and confirmed through the California Law Enforcement Telecommunications System, CLETS, before enforcement action is taken. However, there is a scenario where an officer may get behind a stolen vehicle and the suspect chooses to pull over prior to activating their overhead lights and sirens. That has happened. In those particular scenarios, the officer is not able to verify before taking action. Then at that point, once the situation is safe, they will be able to run and confirm the information to verify that the vehicle that they are behind is in fact stolen, that the ALPR system got it correct. If you go to 415.5, so probably, there we go. We worked closely with the city attorney's office, and we have deleted the minimum of 1 year, and we have added the maximum of 30 days. So not only does Flock Safety delete the information after 30 days, if we do not determine that it is potential evidence in a criminal offense, after 30 days, the images are gone. We do not retain them after that. We've redacted or deleted another phrase there, and just a point at the end of that paragraph, and stored in accordance with established records and retention schedule. Again, trying to comply with all of the other related laws. The end of 415.5, again, is just adding that we will not share any of this information. There was another piece of information that was suggested by a community member we added the sentence, nor will ALPR data be shared with any law enforcement agency for the purposes of enforcing prohibitions on reproductive or gender-affirming care. That was a concern. We have no issues with that. We have no intentions on using the system for that. So anyways, we made that adjustment. I believe that is the entirety of our adjustments in our policy. I think the next part is just, again, the procedures and guidelines part to our policy. And I won't go over all of this. It just touches again on the appropriate uses of the equipment, who and how people can access it, the training that will be required, who will oversee all of this information or this program. Again, the accuracy of the ALPR system and the requirement to confirm the information, and then the data retention period of 30 days of storage. I believe that is all I have, and I am available for questions.
Chief, thank you so much. Let me see if there are questions from council members. Questions, Ms. Bruner.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up and some of the information and questions I've had since the last one. And the red line items were very helpful. My question, I had wondered about the, well, maybe I should wait for the usage policy, or should I go right into that document? Were you going to speak separately to that?
Well,
The 415 addendum.
yeah, that was just posted. I just went over just the
Okay.
highlights. I didn't get into
I
the
had
weeds
two
of it.
questions on that,
Yeah.
and that was related to towards the bottom of that, the security section. There's some bullets A through E, and the A refers to not all non-law enforcement requests for access to stored ALPR data shall be processed in accordance with applicable law. And I was curious about the all non-law enforcement, who would non-law enforcement be, and going through this over the weekend. And so thank you for responding to me, and also I was able to get clarification with City Attorney's Office. So I'm wondering if we could consider adding just a clarifying few words, who the non-law enforcement would be, and according to the City Attorney's Office, it may include requests via subpoena, criminal discovery, or court order. To me, that helps clarify what that would be. Would that be?
Yeah, and I think we also discussed the potential for like a public records request, right? So that's another example of a non-law enforcement sort of. So we don't want to limit ourselves, but I think we're open to, we kind of worked on some verbiage. Such requests include requests via a subpoena, criminal discovery is another one, court order, public records request. Those would be at least at a minimum the four potential examples where we would be compelled to turn over the information.
That's
but
helpful,
it's
because otherwise it kind of reads open. So thank you. The last one was E, in that same section. And that the and or, so a case number, incident number, and or reason for the inquiry. And again, some recommended language. I'm wondering, like earlier with the last presentation, it was, it seemed like there always had to be a reason for the inquiry, but that reason would have some type of information associated with it, even if it's out of Santa Cruz. some other city or county sheriffs, there would be an incident or a case number associated. And so having both associated with that just for security reasons.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the examples would be when we do our training, we have to be able to access, so you can actually type in the required field training or test, which would allow the students to participate and play inside the system. So that would be one of those incidents where we wouldn't have a case number or we wouldn't have an incident number to input into that required field. Another example would be under exigent circumstances. And a prime example would be, you know, I'll use an active shooter incident. Let's say at a school, we may not want an officer to tie up a dispatcher to call them for an incident number or a case number right at that moment. If we have a vehicle description and we can plug into the system and start searching the cameras if a suspect vehicle is fleeing the scene. So in those particular cases, they would still put information into the required field. They would put something such as active shooter investigation, right, or training. It wouldn't be left blank. The system itself doesn't even let you go to the next step if you leave it blank. But there's still an explanation and a legal and legitimate explanation that can be audited. Later on in the policy, we do have a requirement of auditing the access of this information on an annual basis. So I believe that that sort of security is covered in the policy through the auditing, as well as the system itself still requires an explanation, even if we can't quite get to that case number at that moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions or comments? Anyone with us this evening wishing to comment on this item? Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. Bruce Walker, medical field. Thank you for your time for this. And I disagree with and am shocked that these cameras are even being considered here in Santa Cruz. There are positive benefits, it sounds like, for them, but there also are negative. And I wish to thank you, Councilmember Sandy Brown, for pointing out last time that the red light cameras are for violations, not for everybody going through the intersection. These are catching everybody going in and out of town. I find it interesting that two of the backers are Homeland Security. I understand they changed the wording from their papers that they're putting in, but it's still Homeland Security. And Northern California Intelligence Agency or Committee, why are they helping back the installing of these cameras, Homeland Security and Intelligence? It makes me wonder. The World Health Organization is working on getting governments to go along with our federal government to sign on to their agenda to take away all our rights around the world, and if they choose to, using protection as the excuse. We also need to keep the World Economic Forum in mind with this agenda. Plenty of agendas are happening right now around the world. A key word that came up, also I wanted to bring up that in San Francisco, part of maybe the drop in automobiles being broken into is that they are using bait autos in town, and they're watching those and catching people that way also, not necessarily through the cameras. A key word here in my mind is data. The pictures belong to the police department. But who gets the data? There's also data behind these pictures. There's data with who's going in and out. There's data that can be used if all of a sudden, say, this group that was here today all afternoon, they aren't in agreement with our federal government at the moment, so they could be called domestic terrorists. And domestic terrorism is something that can be used against us citizens to track us, to keep us in line. I just wanted to say also that this seems to me that it's a beginning of the camera installation. Oh, okay. Well, anyways, I wanted to finish up with, we know who, what, where, and when, but I will finish with a question, and that question is, why?
Thank you. Ms. Bush, do we have anyone online? Good. We'll go to that person now. Person online, good evening.
Hello, this is Jazz Mia again. I wanted to speak up on this to say I strongly oppose the installation of these automated license plate readers, the ALPRs, within Santa Cruz city limits. First of all, this is expanding policing through surveillance. It makes people feel less safe, and it's an invasion of privacy. Once you collect this data, it can get out of SCPD's hands. I see in the ALPR policy manual that information will not be shared with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Customs and Border Patrol. And it also stated, quote, nor will ALPR data be shared with any law enforcement agency for the purposes of enforcing prohibitions on reproductive or gender affirming care. And I appreciate that. However, what about subpoenas or any leaks of the data collected? How can SCPD really claim that this information will be protected in a world of threats to and weaknesses of cybersecurity? I'm a therapist who is bound by HIPAA, and even my notes can be subpoenaed by a judge. Also, we have seen leaks of protected health information. So imagine if this somehow was still used to track out-of-state people going to Planned Parenthood. Also, aren't we a sanctuary city? What if this information ends up being used against undocumented individuals? Wouldn't that violate our terms of being a sanctuary city? Chief of Police Bernie Escalante said he would use the ALPRs to, quote, identify and investigate potential threats before criminal actions occur. That sounds a lot like Minority Report, for those of you who get that reference. We're really forsaking the whole innocent until proven guilty. Also, although there is funding for now, this is proposed to be a permanent installation, and it seems like this will end up using our general fund taxpayer dollars down the road. I don't want any more money going to SCPD. They already get the most of our general fund. They get 24%, I calculated, of our fiscal year 2024 general fund, more than any other sector. And lastly, if a violation of privacy and essentially what could be a violation of human rights is not enough of an argument for you, then I'd want you to think about the economic impact. I strongly believe that installing these ALPRs will reduce tourism. Who would want to come to a city that will surveil them at every entrance and exit and major intersection, and possibly use such info against them? And trust that they will know. Due to the moral imperative to protect potential visitors and fellow human beings, if you pass this, I will organize people to advertise that Santa Cruz is doing this, and you will see probably a reduction in tourism. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person online. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi, Reggie Meisler here. I think you kind of guys, you already mentioned it, right? Like this can be subpoenaed, this information. And as someone who like cares about data privacy and protection from like government surveillance and things like that, you know, subpoena kind of breaks everything. I mean, like when we're talking about someone getting an abortion in another state because it's criminalized in the state that they live in, the exact fear is that the judge, they would be sent to court, and therefore a court could use discovery or a subpoena to get that information. So just saying that we're not going to do that, it doesn't actually protect you from that data being used against you, right? Because the whole idea of being like caught using abortion in a state where it is legal, but you live in like a state where it's criminalized, that is a court case. So I don't know, like, I feel like, you know, case closed, right? Like this is going to be used for that. So I think we need to like just take a step back and think about that. And then I think the broader, I mean, this kind of leaves out other really perilous questions about the fact that we had license plate readers already in Beach Flats. That was our test community. The poorest, brownest community in Santa Cruz was where we put our surveillance technology as a test. I mean, the systemic racism of this is already just incredibly on the front, right? And then the fact that we're bragging that this catches people in stolen vehicles. I mean, who are people in stolen vehicles? People don't just go steal vehicles and drive around knowing that they could get caught in broad daylight. These tend to be poor people trying to get a vehicle, often unhoused, right? And they're buying a vehicle on Craigslist for cheap, not knowing it's stolen. And so then what you're doing is you're punishing the poor person like we did last month, where SCPD surrounded an RV with AR-15s pointed at them in an RV on Delaware Avenue, as though this person is some sort of drug kingpin or something. These are just unhoused people purchasing vehicles for cheap on Craigslist, not knowing these vehicles are stolen. So let's not invent a reality that we're achieving some great sort of criminal justice here. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of check on these narratives and just say that I oppose this. Thank you.
Ms. Bush, we have another person online. Next person online, good evening, welcome.
Thank you. This is Peter Gelblum from the Santa Cruz County chapter of the ACLU of Northern California. I submitted a very lengthy email and spoke at length last meeting on November 28th. I'm just going to make a few points here. My key point before, and I also wanted to throw in, please, next time you consider allowing open communications to go for 4 hours, think about the effect on the rest of the agenda. It's not a good effect. My main point last time was that there is no data to show the efficacy of the ALPRs. Chief Escalante, in response to that, for the first time, has presented what he claims to be some data. There was no data on the initial presentation whatsoever. And there was no data in the agenda packet. None for this meeting. Some came up today. It was not available to the public in the agenda packet, which I think is not fair. But it's not really data. It's got some some information that apparently some crime was reduced by some percentages in some neighboring communities. There's no citation to any authority for that. And most importantly, there is no evidence that any of that had anything to do with ALPRs. Auto thefts were reduced, well, from what to what and when? It could have been all sorts of reasons other than the presence of ALPRs. There is still no data in front of you to show that ALPRs improve public safety. And at the same time, there is a huge amount of information in front of you that there are costs. As one person already said, the general fund will be impacted at least after 2 years to the tune of $66,000 per year. And there's undoubted invasion of civil liberties and privacy, weighed against a very uncertain, if at all, existing benefit. Secondly, so I think that most of the stuff that the chief presented to you were anecdotes. Well, let me give you some anecdotes too, to show that ALPRs are dangerous and can be and have been abused. In Menlo Park, an officer used ALPR data to track his girlfriend's travels. Texas is using ALPR data to track women leaving the state to get abortions. As Mr. Meister pointed out, that information can be subpoenaed here. It can also be hacked here to track somebody here. An Ohio officer pleaded guilty to stalking his ex through the ALPR. A Michigan officer hooked up home addresses of women he found attractive. 2 Miami-Dade officers ran checks on a journalist after he aired unflattering stories about the department. So once again, in summary, there's little, if any, data showing effectiveness, and there's a great deal of information showing harm. and I urge you to deny the request for the ALPRs despite the improvement in the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bush, we have two more folks. We'll take the next person online. Good evening and welcome.
Thanks. Hey, it's Brad Snyder again. I find it vaguely dystopian that you're considering this. I think a lot of people would if they thought it through. There are reasons why pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong believe that the Chinese Communist Party relies so heavily on the facial recognition cameras and the data from these cameras. Integrating that is something that many attempts have been made to the ALPR type surveillance. It is a surveillance state sort of thing. Doesn't make it all bad that catalytic converters stop getting stolen and people who commit horrific crimes get captured and crimes are prevented, but it's not all good. It's like 100% completely not all good. Which is, hard. Something makes it hard to put it in the balance. But it's funny how the state is instituting or starting a program where they're tracking people's, speeding. Which lately in the state, the last year in particular, it seems like there's been a rash of people driving in such a ridiculous rate of speed that it almost seems necessary. It just seems too convenient. That it's being sort of done at the same time. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think you guys should just put up those like fake dollar store surveillance cameras that are not real. Like just have cameras that appear to be real, and maybe that'll help every bit as much. Sorry, had to make fun of it a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person online. Good evening. Welcome. Good evening.
Yes. Hello, this is Garrett. I must say, I booted my computer twice and tried to join about 6 times on Zoom, and he continues to say, unable to join this webinar. You were removed from the webinar by the host that cannot rejoin. I'm not saying you did it on purpose, but I think there's an issue there. Anyway, this license reader item doesn't sit too well with me for the following reasons. It was clear at the first recent presentation of this item, and today it is and has easily a large majority of people with strong feelings and principles against it. So much so, in my opinion, rather than looking like you don't care a hoot, appearing dispassionately authoritarian, you tabled the matter only to bring it back 2 weeks later. I suppose you were hoping the opposition would disappear. I mean, what has actually changed in 2 weeks? In the past, say the Cold War, the focus of national defense was outward toward our enemies. But since the Cold War ended and after 9/11, and especially recently, the focus of the CIA, DOJ, NSA, TSA, and Homeland Security is to become forces that have been turned inward on the people with spying, a loss of privacy, even freedom, and even used to silence political opposition, censor, and control media. This is more spying on the people. There are probably costs associated with it that you aren't really saying. After reviewing the application documents, I see you must meet one of 11 Homeland Security objectives. None of those are to find stolen cars. Almost all are either national security, involve data sharing, or locally irrelevant, like emergency preparedness or election security. You name it, none of those have much to do with normal local law enforcement, and I suspect even those are just placeholders for purposes I can only imagine. Which exactly of these 11 Homeland Security functions did you plan to cite as a function now of our local law enforcement that meets these objectives that doesn't involve data sharing and spying? Once again, this is a classic example of taking the big money and doing what others want, need, and are willing to pay for, besides whether the people of Santa Cruz want it or not. You just take the money, whenever and wherever it comes from, to do as they say, no matter, even if it costs extra, and no matter if the citizens want it or not. From reading the documents, I don't think the previous presentation fairly described what these Homeland Security objectives really are. Why doesn't the state just monitor the state highways and freeways and they can do their own spying? Yes, on the other hand, if you really did have the license plate numbers of terrorists or systems to trigger on, that would be great. Do you have any? Why then store everyone's data for a month if you know who they are? they're going to be long gone by then. Thanks.
Ms. Bush, anyone else online? Okay, last call. Anyone wishing to make comment on this item? Matter is back before the council. Be glad to recognize a member for a question, for a motion.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation and add those minor clarification sentences around the usage and privacy policy, the security section A and E.
Okay, let's just slow it down. Take us to the place in the agenda where you would like to start making amendments. Thank you.
It is the document titled the usage and, okay, let me open it. Policy 415, Addendum, Automated License Plate Readers, Usage and Privacy Policy.
Okay, so let's hold while Ms. Bush gets there.
Yeah, but it's not the red line document.
I need time. I didn't realize that was coming.
How would you?
If you want it up, I need time to type it up really quick. Yeah, I need time to type because I only had the red line, so I would have to swap out what they sent me.
Ms. Bush, how would you like to proceed on this?
I'm just going to share my screen
Yes,
of the email that you sent.
very good.
Would that work for you? And is that understandable and clear?
Yeah, do you also, while we're at it, do you want to add in there the public records request as an additional kind of such as?
Let's see.
So such requests may include requests via subpoena, criminal discovery, court order, or public records request.
Yes.
Okay, and we'll hold for a minute while Ms. Bush gets that down.
It's under security, under policy 415 addendum. It's past the policy. It's the usage and privacy policy. Oh yeah, it's past that. Yes. Correct. Go all the way to the end, security. And security and A. It says all non-law enforcement requests. And so keep what's there and just add the next sentence would say such requests may include requests via a subpoena, criminal discovery, public records requests, or court orders.
Can I ask Stephanie Duck a question? She has her hand up.
As soon as we make sure
You can go ahead.
you're good there? Okay. Ms. Brenner?
I wanted to just recognize City Attorney's Office, Stephanie Duck, since she has her hand raised. And if you had input on this, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Bruner. Stephanie Duck with the City Attorney's Office. I just wanted to point out that the section, the language that you're modifying in the privacy and usage policy in that addendum is also included in the ALPR policy in section 415.6. And it's the same subdivisions A and E, and that is on page 6, I believe, of the items that were included in the packet. So for consistency's sake, if you're adding the language in the privacy and usage policy, I would recommend making those changes in the ALPR policy as well.
Part of your motion.
Yes, I will include that as part of the motion in both documents that change is reflected. I think that clarification is really helpful.
Ms. Bush, give you a chance to catch up again? Good to go? Oh, you need to, did you say you need time?
I just need some time.
Certainly.
If you guys want to see it, I need time.
Take such time as you need.
Second on the motion? Did you get a second on the motion? Yeah. I'm happy to.
Okay. Keep going. We're with your motion. You're adding language to it. Ms. Kalantari Johnson is willing to second as soon as we get this in the right and proper form. Thank you. Good.
I can get it. Do you guys want to see it up? Because I can do it after the fact. I don't need to do it.
Okay, but you've captured it.
I have.
Though.
I got it.
Correct. Okay, good.
I just didn't know if you wanted it up.
I think we're good. So Ms. Bruner has made that motion, and Ms. Kalantari Johnson has seconded that motion. Under discussion, Ms. Bruner, you're recognized to open.
Thank you. I'm really appreciative of all the input we've received and concerns, and appreciative of all the clarifications and understanding how this is used and how it's, when we first started out with this item, there was kind of this a perception that it would be some Santa Cruz police officer surveilling people, like sitting at a camera and watching people as they drove through or drove by a camera. And so I appreciate all the steps along the way of really answering the questions and really making it clear for me that even though there's a photo of the rear of the vehicle and the license plate and not the person, and it's not even used unless your license plate is flagged for relation to a crime, essentially an abduction or some serious stuff. And I think we have cameras everywhere. Even Ring cameras are everywhere, and everyone's recorded everywhere. I am glad we got to a point with these, the policy in place as we're voting on this, the security and usage in here. And I really hope that we can use the starting point, if this passes, the data, the metrics, so that after the 2-year program is up and it's reevaluated, how it was used and how effective it was, to consider if we continue with it. Because as I understand, it's not an automatic continuance after 2 years. And so I think it will be really important to measure from the baseline and how it's used. I think it could be a very effective tool in many situations. So I'm happy to support it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown is recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Bruner, for your comments and your work to put some additional kind of explanation and transparency into the policy, the guidance, and some modicum of guardrails, really. I wonder if the maker and seconder of the motion, really towards the end that you suggested about how this, getting data on the effectiveness, how we make a decision in the future about whether or not to proceed, what changes might be made. I did send the request. I'm asking if you would be amenable to an amendment that adds direction to SCPD to submit an annual report to the City Council on the use and effectiveness of the ALPRs. And I included some information here. Bonnie, I know you're, sorry to ask you to do this when you're in the middle of something else, so I will just read them. If people feel like you need to see them, we can do that. But the total number of scans, the total number of hits generated, number of arrests as a result of ALPR use, number of vehicles recovered as a result of ALPR use, and some kind of equity assessment that explains what populations have been affected. There's, I think, we have a statement in the summary report, the agenda report, that this is, going to help promote health in all policies. And so I think that, when we think about health and equity and our goals, it would be important to just understand who's been affected as a result. So that's my ask. It's just an annual report written in memo form to the council or as a presentation. I won't be here to receive that, so I would leave it to future councils to decide how they receive that info.
Let me make sure. Is that are you requesting that as a friendly amendment? Would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
I would accept that as a friendly amendment to submit an annual update with the criteria. If that criteria, it looks like, I would hope that you would let us know if any of those criteria, if there was some reason why you couldn't report on those criteria, but yes.
Is that agreeable to the second?
Can I see that back up, the very last piece? I have concerns that if of the implications of racial profiling, because my understanding is that we're not collecting data on demographics through this. So if I can see the language of that last piece, equity assessment based what population have been affected. So maybe Councilmember Brown, you can explain what you're looking for there, and then if the chief could let us know, what do we collect in terms of the population?
Okay. So let's start first. There was a question to Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown?
Yeah, thank you. So the point is to identify who's been affected by follow-up actions based on the hits that are generated, not how many, what demographics own what vehicles, license plates get scanned. I'm talking about just understanding. You do collect that information when an arrest is made, that those demographics are available for police enforcement actions. So that's what I'm asking for. Who's been affected, the demographics of who has been affected by.
And then I think you had a second question to the chief about whether this was data available to be collected and reported upon. In terms of the context of.
Yeah, and if you remember at the last presentation, I showed a slide about, which will go up on our transparency portal, that Flock provides the vehicles that are detected in the last 30 days. That'll be updated by Flock. Hot list hits in the last 30 days, searches in the last 30 days. So that will also still, so it'll probably be a collection of all that information over the course of the year. I think for the most part, we'll definitely be able to determine number of vehicles recovered. And in most cases, we should be able to collect the data on race, ethnicity, gender, those sort of things on those subjects that are arrested, if in fact they don't take off running from us or something like that, right? So we'll do our best to capture all that information and, yeah.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Ms. Kollentag-Johnson? This is still to you.
It answers my question. I'm just trying to assess what we are going to determine from that. I understand the sentiment, Councilmember Brown, and what I'm hearing from the chief is that it's going to capture folks who are in the system because they've committed a crime. And so what we're asking for is to get the demographics of those who commit crime in our community, essentially. That doesn't necessarily mean it's an equity assessment. I think so I'm trying to understand how we get to what I think is the intent of what you're saying. That's a huge, bigger issue of the disproportionate minority confinement here in our community and in society. I just don't think that they're necessarily.
I'm not interested in getting into a long debate about this, so if you don't like it, that's fine. If you don't want to accept it, it's fine. I'm not going to debate it.
I accept all the pieces except that last piece because I don't think it gives us any information about equity.
So I want to be certain, the last piece to you is, when you said the last piece.
The equity assessment based on the population.
So the other
piece
portion of what the gentlelady is talking about makes sense with the exception of the last item. Chief, clear on that?
So still collect the data, but it's not
Report.
necessarily making any connections towards the equity piece.
There we are.
That's
Clear
fair.
on that?
Fair enough.
Okay. Ms. Bush, I want to make sure you can catch up with this. Agreeable all around? Okay. It's agreeable to make our agreeable a second. Let me ask if there are further amendments to be offered on this item by council members. Seeing and hearing none. Ms. Bush?
Can I make a comment? Sorry.
Well, certainly.
I just, I wanted to appreciate the additional information from the chief. Just say that I have spoken to some members of the community since this was brought before us last time, and I want to thank Mr. Peter Gelblum for making time to reach out to me, and I read your letters, and you asked some good questions, so I asked some questions in return. I asked for data on effectiveness, and I think what you showed us was a pretty good snapshot of improved public safety across various communities. We heard from our community that public safety is a high priority. We saw it in the polls that were brought before us a couple weeks ago when we looked at the sales tax measure. Our officers put their lives on their line every day, and if this is a tool that will help them do their work to address what the community has identified as a priority, public safety, then I'm in support of it. I think the additional pieces that Councilmember Bruner added and the annual report that Councilmember Brown added will make it even more transparent. So appreciate the work, and I'm going to be supporting this.
Further question, comment, debate, discussion?
Just very quick comment. I want to thank Chief Escalante for all the changes that he's made and for the additions that Councilmember Bruner and Councilmember Brown have added to this as well. And they brought me on the client to support this as well. So I just wanted to thank them for that.
Chief, I'd like to thank you for meeting with me, meeting with other people. I appreciate that. As you and I have discussed this morning, I'm still not over the Patriot Act or the reauthorization of the Patriot Act, and I mean that seriously. I think that under the guise of an attack on our country, we gave up enormous civil and personal rights in that process. I totally trust you. It's not about you. For me, this is a line. I'm not going to be able to support it, as I told you this morning. I really appreciate all the folks that you have met with and how vastly improved this is. This is a principle for me. I'll be voting no. I appreciate your good work, and the clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmembers Newsom?
Aye.
Brown?
No.
Watkins? Aye. Bruner?
Aye.
Kalantari Johnson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Golder?
Aye.
And Mayor Keeley?
No. Chief, thank you very much. Thanks for a good year. We are on item number 27. These